And we are recording. Yes, we're recording. Oh, yay.
Yay.
Okay, well, welcome everyone.
So my name is Kirk Prine.
And my name is Donnie Lowry, and we are thrilled to welcome you back for another Queer Tribe Conversation.
Amen.
Yes, yes. And we are in lovely San Francisco.
And we're happy to introduce someone new to us. So
yes.
we're actually just getting to know Ken, but he has 3 million people that we all love and share in common. So, you know, he has to be like some avatar or something.
Oh, I love avatars. Yay.
So welcome, Ken. Donnie's going to read your lovely bio, and then we'll get started with asking you some questions.
Yes, the bio is very juicy. So we have with us the lovely Ken Schneck, and he is with us in Ohio, where a baby was born over here. And Ken is an author, professor, radio host, and rabble rouser.
I like the rabble rouser the best.
Yes. His travelogue, Seriously, What Am I Doing Here? The Adventures of a Wandering and Wandering Gay Jew, was published in 2017. LGBTQ Cleveland was released in 2018. LGBTQ Columbus hit the shelves in June of 2019. And LGBTQ Cincinnati comes out in June 2020. Ken is a frequent contributor to the Huffington Post, Cleveland Magazine, and FreshWater Cleveland, and currently serves as the editor for Prizm Magazine, Ohio's only LGBTQ plus publication.
Wow.
For 10 years, he was the producer host of This Show Is So Gay, the award-winning, long-running radio show podcast. In his spare time, he is a tenured professor of education at Baldwin Wallace University.
Great, wow.
So welcome, Ken. We are just delighted to have you here. Thank you for making time for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And if that wasn't a good introduction, I don't know what will be.
So happy to do so.
Thank you, thank you. So as we get to know you, one of the things that we ask everybody who's come on these calls, we've been doing them about 5 years now, is simply to tell us a little about your story, especially your spiritual journey. As a queer man, sounds like as a Jewish man, but what's informed you? What's awakened you? Give us some stories about your experience that kind of informs how you're going to answer the rest of the questions.
Yeah, I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up right outside of New York City. In the temple. I'm youngest of 4, and so I was the 4th bar mitzvah in the family. And my dad is the guy always there on Saturday mornings. He's the guy that every temple has one, that during the bar mitzvah, he's the guy that tells the kids to be quiet. He's in that kind of somewhat strict, conservative, Orthodox faith, grew up in a kosher household, and just was always told, you know, you will grow up and you will marry a Jewish girl. And so I think a lot of times when I talk about my spiritual journey, it's less about finding the answers. I mean, guys can write about them and learn everything I can about them. But for me, so I am always just looking for, you know, the next step. I'm looking for the next piece of fulfillment, and I'm always looking internally and trying to figure out what is it I'm supposed to do next. And I'm really conscious of listening to that voice. Like a very bad gauge. I certainly am quite covered with tattoos, but 2 of the most important to me, I don't know if they'll show up well, one do, and the other one says good. And that is my spiritual journey, both as individual phrases. So I'm constantly trying to, I'm really conscious of always trying to do and put work out there into the world. I'm really conscious of the idea of good, both as a good person and also as a collective good. And then I always put those two things together. You know, what does it mean to do good, to put it out there? And as a phrase together, that really is my spirituality. I, you know, I openly, and my relationship with Judaism. I know that my next book, after I finish up LGBTQ Cincinnati, will be about my relationship to Judaism, and I've started already. But even the journey that I've been on for that next book about Judaism has already landed me back at that place where the answer for me is about questions, and each answer leads me to a different question. And if I keep pursuing that path, that's my spirituality. That's my
Wow, beautiful. Yeah, I mean,
answers.
the
I'm not a
underpinnings
great
of-
Jew in my parents' estimation. Yeah.
so your tattoos say, again, what? Your tattoos.
Sure. One.
Yeah, do show and tell.
Yeah. So we got do over here, and
Do.
we have good.
Good. Great.
Somewhere over there. There's
Yeah.
good right there. And then together they're do good. They're also they're in a typewriter font, which is really important to me because I think this writing, that my way of asking questions and putting together stories is through writing. So even the font there is very specific for me. Good is through my pen.
Powerful. Well, we talk in our language, we talk a lot about kind of archetypal things that describe us, that we as queer people especially have embodied as storytellers and mystics who were poets and writers, and so be good and living in questions is really kind of the spiritual tone of all the stuff that we do. So it's very exciting to hear that that's been your journey, and that you literally wear it on your body, kind of emitting it out to the world through your body. So excellent.
Yeah, it's become a thing for me that I didn't necessarily. It's become a thing that I necessarily intend, and it's just become by rote. Is that even today I taught a class at a local community college of students that I have never met before, I will never see again, and I just instinctively end almost all interactions. I think it's become kind of a joke with my students, but I think they take it to heart as well. I end every class by saying, all right, get out there, go do good things. That's what I say after a single class I teach.
Beautiful.
And it's just become part of my mantra and art I put out there. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So your journey's been informed by and shaped by both questions and your relationship with your Jewish path and origins. And those two things have kind of fed you as a queer man. So how do you bring those two things together, leading me into my next question? How do you bring those two things together in seeing us as a queer tribe? So those might be two questions. Do you see us as a queer tribe? And how does your journey as the writer, question, storyteller, and man on a Jewish journey inform you inform you? Yeah, period.
Yeah. It's a great question. And the word tribe is a very Jewish word. It's certainly a word that I grew up with in Judaism, of this idea of tribe and tribes. So it's a word that like I instinctually and instinctively respond to. So I love hearing it in this context. Whether by design or by happenstance, and I think with me it's always a little bit of both, because I'm not a great planner and I'm a little bit I put myself in the position where I have been able to be a student of queer history.
Mm-hmm.
Choices, and many of them were just, I followed whatever my path I think was. So hosting the radio show for and talking to over 500-600 different guests, there's no way I'm walking away thinking that there's not a queer tribe.
Yes.
I have different roles in it. In some ways, because I'm very, very geeky and dorky, I love the idea of superhero teams, and I really believe us more than all have our own little superpowers, and we have our frictions, and we have the things that we do really well, but that ultimately I think some of that history has been lost. I'm very open about it's certainly open weird spot in the gay community in that I'm way too I'm too young to really have been impacted by everything that happened in the 80s, right? I never went to a funeral. I never lost friends to HIV and AIDS, but I'm also too old to be a moron, right? And to not know this incredible that our community has had. So it puts me in this really interesting middle ground where I've always kind of felt like an observer, where I know our history and I'm really familiar with our history, but I didn't experience it firsthand. So this idea of a tribe is really important to me, and I've always taken my role as kind of a very seriously between generations to pull our unbelievably rich history into the present, and then also to update a lot of what we're talking about, because the issues we're talking about today, particularly with LGBTQ youth, are not what we talked about in the 80s. So I do believe that we're a tribe. I believe that we have too much history not to be, but I think that sometimes I the word tribe just because I do get sick sometimes of the word community, because I think the word community implies, quite frankly, it implies that we all get along in a way that we don't, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with there being friction between the different letters in our alphabet. So I think of us more as that superhero team, and we bring different things to the table. So yeah, I do believe piece now, and what I try to stress more than anything in my writing and in my teaching is that we can't just be a tribe. We have to be that we have to talk about more than our sexual orientation. That I'm not just gay. I'm a white gay Jew, and there's access that I get as being a part of that community, and I think that that's what we have to. Our lack of protections, we had to lead with being gay, and I think here in Ohio, we still don't have housing protections or employment protections or public accommodation protections. So I lead with being gay in many different contexts. A male, and that's a white gay Jewish male, and that's a more full representation of my identity, where there's not, I don't have another word other than whitewashing, but that's ironic in this context. We allow people in our tribe to bring the full of their identity to bear, that we not boil them down solely to our sexual orientation, even as in context, it's an important thing, but that we have a conversation about being a Black trans woman is fundamentally male. So I think that we have to just remember our shared history and remember that we're things, but I'm okay with the fact that we're so different in this tribe as long as we are giving each other the space to be different. It's kind of my take on it.
I may have to quote you on that. Yeah, that's delicious. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, and so one, thank you for being a historian for our tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the projects that you have been working and
Happy.
are working on. So thank you for doing that. I know as in my early journey, and everyone probably on the call, depending on age, I love that you kind of brought up, you know, the differentiations of depending on when you've come out on your journey and what kind of history did you even know about? You know, when I grew up in Ohio, the mayor was still running around saying, oh, we don't have a problem with gay people because we don't have any gay people. So, you know, that was the context of what Ohio was for me when I was there, and how far when, you know, we did the second gay pride march through the city and got city council to announce it, and 500 people walked through the streets openly when I was president of the coalition there, and how different it is now, where they probably have 5,000 people come in and celebrate, and what are the concerns of the tribe now as opposed to the concerns of the tribe were before. So that kind of leads me into my next question, which is simply, so talk about visions for us as a movement, vision for us as a tribe, or even visions of the gifts you talked about, kind of the gifts coming through different periods of time. What are the gifts that are trying to emerge right now?
You are a salient point in my life, not a difficult point, but a salient point, because I don't know that I've ever been as restless as I very unintentionally have thrown myself into some literature, even when I'm just trying to read fiction. For some reason, books that the activism of San Francisco in the 1970s just keeps coming up. Some of those were deliberate choices. You know, I just finally read When We Rise, Cleve Jones, the journalist of Castro Street, which, you know, The Mayor of Castro Street is an extraordinarily important book for me. It's you know, Harvey Milk's history has always sat on my bedside table for about 20 years now. Wow. But I've always felt a little bit of disconnect with something doesn't totally click for me with Harvey Milk. And then last month I read the Schultz, and that's what clicked. It was never Harvey Milk that was my identification. It was Randy Schultz. It was Randy Schultz writing. Randy Schultz had problematic as well. But it was a real salient moment for me of, that's my activism. Lately, as I've just kind of been wrestling with it, and I'll just give you a quick example. Last week, so again, as I mentioned, here in Ohio, we don't have any actions for the LGBTQ community in employment or in housing or in public accommodations. And last week, 2 members of the House of Representatives proposed a bill to give us these protections. It's called the Fairness Act, the Ohio Fairness Act. And the 2 individuals who proposed this legislation, one Republican and one Democrat. Well, by virtue of my being editor of Prizm, Ohio's LGBTQ publication, I reached out to the executive director of Equality Ohio, which is our statewide LGBTQ organization, just to get some background on the bill. And so we talked about it. She gave me the background on the bill. And then I asked, all right, so what can our readers do, right? How can we do good? How can we support this legislation? Mm-hmm. And her response to me was, there are 2 really important things we need people to do. We need everyone in Ohio to write an email or place a call to the Republican House member to thank him, right? Because the Republican will. So we have to thank him. And then the other thing that we can do is prepare our individual stories if this comes up for hearings, you know, so that we have people to testify. And I took that in and I'm thinking, all right, well, sure, I guess, let's do those things. But then I asked her, by the way, I did a very Donald Trump thing and I own this. I said, well, what about people who say that we should be doing more than that? Which, by the way, when he says, people are saying, you're talking about yourself, sir. And I was totally talking about me when I asked, well, what about people who want to do more than that? Taking my time and writing a thank you to a Republican House member. And she was very clear in saying, no, these are the most important. But I'm at a place right now where that's not a satisfying form of doing good for me. Seeing Cleve Jones and all these 70s, they would take to the streets in San Francisco when an LGBTQ ordinance was repealed.
Yes.
They would gather everyone together in San Francisco, right, to protest what was happening in other parts of the country.
Yes. Coming
together, they were making themselves be seen, and there was a power in that. And my poor housemate who's in the other room right now can hear me about, we have to be doing more, we have to be doing more. And I'm kind of in that place right now of sure, let's send our emails and let's prepare our testimony. But by virtue of, again, my previous books about Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati, I want to see rallies happening at the same time. Hey, we truly do not have the same rights as our straight neighbors. I want us to be active. There are amazing rallies right now around protests around reproductive rights and about climate change.
Yes.
And those are super important. But we as an LGBTQ community and as a tribe need to be coming together as well and taking to the streets. We don't need to protest what's happening in Minneapolis. It's happening right here in Ohio. We don't have those protections. So I'm in a restless place. I need to stop talking about it and actually put something more concrete together. But I'm hearkening back to that beautiful activism of the 70s. And, maybe it's not necessarily, I don't know if any of you were, how involved you were ACT UP. Maybe it's not in the vein of ACT UP, but it's also not, in the vein of quilting, of making a quilt. It's got to be somewhere in the middle where it's really acting we're doing. And I have the privilege. And so for me to not use my privilege and with access to power, for me to not use that is irresponsible. But I got to actually do it and stop talking about it.
Wow, that was juicy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really juicy. In fact, I'm gonna re-listen to this call just so I can kind of listen to that bracket, that part. Yeah. So if you were to come up with a call for all of us, I hear you're wrestling inside of you. What's your response right now? But what's your call to us? How would you call us to that embodied activism is what I call it, where we're in people's loving disturbance presence with each other, and letting them know who we are, that we love them, and in sharing voices. But I'm putting words in your mouth. What would your call to activism be?
Yeah, I mean, I think having those, looking for each and every opportunity and raise awareness is both critical and exhausting. It is both of those things. And I think saying it's one and not the other doesn't do it justice, right? Saying ignores the fact that, oh my gosh, it's really exhausting doing all this work. And then saying that it's exhausting doesn't, Day when I was talking to, so I taught this class at this local community college. They had me in for an hour to talk about, well, how can we create change in society? They're embarking on a project. I have a whole spiel and materials and worksheets of things to run through with them of how to put together your activism elevation, the most important elements of creating change in society. I have all of that academic stuff and activities that I did with them, but even 6 hours later, I'm not exactly sure how for a year before donating blood, but it absolutely came up. And I know that, it was a class of 7 students and a professor who absolutely did not know that I, as the universal blood donor with the blood that can save everyone, cannot go donate blood tomorrow.
Right.
And so I know that in that moment, I did my thing, right? Like I used my voice the way that I use it, but I also raised awareness about something that I know that they didn't know about.
Huh.
Looking for those opportunities, I will fit it in, even if it's obnoxious and relentless. I think I'm pretty tactful, so I do it pretty well. My mom to be consummate dinner party hosts. And so I know how to raise issues without people running into the next room. But I really, I'm going to keep circling back to it. It's about using our privilege. I have that privilege. I have that access. Assuming that people know things like this, I'm never so person in the room. And I knew it. There was not one person in the room who knew that I cannot give blood tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, and you can't unring bells like that, but it takes someone to ring them.
Yes.
I'll tell you one other piece of that puzzle for me too, is there's this fundamental rule of activism that whoever shows up are the people that are supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. And I close to that. I think we spend a lot of time talking about the people who didn't show up, and we ignore the people that did. You know, we say, oh, we're just preaching to the choir, which is one of the most annoying phrases we have ever created. Choir, sing. Stop talking about the people who didn't come to choir rehearsal. That means you're. So that's one of the biggest rules for me is the people who are supposed to be there are there. Work with those people. Do what you can with everybody who's judge how effective an event is by how many people show up. It is the dumbest way to determine if something was successful, but it's the first thing. The quality of the interactions. That's the measure of activism. That's a big.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah, I call it my spirit meter. When I get chills on my arms, it's kind of like, oh, he's like onto something, you know. So some truth is being shared. So yeah. So really applaud, work with, enable, empower the people who are there, rather than focus on who should have been there and who wasn't there, and all of that stuff, and kind of waste our energy. Yeah, wow. Well, the other piece I want to, so are you saying though, you know, I think about the women's movement or the climate activism that you're talking about that gets organized so rapidly now, and we're seeing mobilizations around themes that really do concern everybody on the planet. But do you think that energy is in the queer tribe to mobilize in a way that we can we can be the change even more effectively than we are?
I'll answer that in a very circuitous and did that work I thought I was going to do for the rest of my life, and I burnt out. I actually burnt out. I was a dean of students at 25 years old. I burnt out at 30. I'm not very good at it. But one of the best things I ever did, and I swear it has application here, on college campuses, various different student groups. And one of the best things I ever did was tell the students, you know, each student group has a budget where they're given money to do their programming. You can only have half your budget. You can only have 50% of your budget. The only way that you can is to co-sponsor with another group. I don't think that we have the capacity to plan something huge range of groups. And I think that sometimes I actually did a talk last Friday night in Columbus to partner with other groups, but they won't sign on to my ideas. That's not partnership. When you present a finished product to other groups, not partnership. But if we really went in with the question of how could we, right, invite a ton of groups together to say, how can we show awareness, getting some media coverage, like some general basic goals, but how can we show together instead of me going in and saying, okay, I think we should do this from 11 to 1 on Valentine's Day, and this is who we should invite, and this is what but we do, and it's obnoxious, and it's condescending, and it's not a true partnership. Well, I don't know why they're not signing on, because you just presented them with a finished product. There was no, we start out, and this is messy, frustrating work of inviting people in and saying, this look, and not doing it with an end goal in mind. That's how we could really pull this off. You know, we're not organizations. There are tons and tons. And to get them all to come together, there need to be entry points. Oh, it might not be, right? Like when we think about ACT UP and how the small group act up because and so we need to wear suits and ties, because the only way the pharmaceutical companies are going to listen to us is if we're wearing suits. There's still this idea of, even here in Ohio, write that letter, write that email to the Republican, because we need to look palatable. Okay, and let's keep in mind, as I told Doug earlier, I have tenure, so I don't have to look palatable, right? Like that's a privilege that I haven't looked like if it was really messy. It's not all clean lines, but it's still something where people, I think we absolutely have the capacity to do this, but it's not an HRC thing. It's not a, champagne campaign with all, let's all show up, the white people who can afford the tuxedos, to go to the HRC gala and see the really, it's not the messy thing that we need. We need something messier where groups can really come together. I think the answer, long-winded answer, was yes, intersectional approach.
Okay. So don't be afraid of our messiness.
No, I love
it. Great. Well, I know for some of our audience that will have great appeal to them on many levels.
Great.
Yeah, great. Wow. So how's our time?
Oh,
we're doing okay?
Yeah, we're doing fine. We have about
great.
15 minutes.
Great. So your vision for us in the age of Trump is any other words of vision? So you're sounding a call, but what's the vision? What's the vision that you have for us?
I don't, I resist the idea that things are different right now. I think that things are definitely heightened, and I, as a journalist, certainly feel more attacked than I've ever been. But what are the two options? At the age of Trump, and being attacked as a journalist, or at a liberal arts campus, where that's not very well respected. I'm attacked as the LGBTQ community. And so there's all these different ways. So what does that mean, right? That doesn't mean that I then retreat. I guess I could. I just redouble my efforts. I think what we saw this week on Tuesday, right, what we're affectionately calling a rainbow wave, were in this for office elected, including some historic firsts. The first gay Muslim elected, by the way, was right here in Ohio, and that was pretty cool. And so I think people really using their voices is always going to be the vision for me. I used to say on the radio show all the time, how do you use your voice in your own unique way? Right? Is you should engage in a journey, if you don't know what it is, to find out what your unique way of using your voice. How do you use your voice to lift up other people's voices? That was my message before Trump. That's my message during Trump. That's my vision after Trump. How do you use your voice? It is fulfilling when you are being authentic and using your voice in the way that you know how to do it. Like, I'm not going to go out there and say, I think my way of doing it is to win American Idol. That's not going to happen. And whatever your way is the way that you do it. Maybe it's letters to the editor. Maybe it is organizing movie nights. It's doing of sexual orientation and faith. And so I think that hasn't changed with Trump. Maybe it feels more important, but then I worry about the other side. Like, I worry about this whole idea that vision feels more important during the age of Trump. Harkens me back to marriage equality, where we were like, oh, it's so important that we do this. And then right after marriage equality was achieved with the Supreme Court, we dropped off precipitously with regards to fundraising and activism. And so I'm really worried that we see the most important time to do this, and then activism drops off. So I still will not have, if Trump was not president, rights here in Ohio. So it's no less important. So I tend to disassociate some of that activism with Trump and more about now, as opposed to our straight neighbors, what do we have left to achieve? And the answer is quite a bit.
Great. Okay. So use your authentic voice. Don't be afraid of being messy, and don't be afraid of being attacked, or find ways to embolden yourself so that that's not your fear, but be your authentic voice.
Yeah. I would add the one more that I would add, which is related to what I said, is showing up for other groups. I think that is critically important. I think that we wish that by my saying, stop saying, why are we preaching to the choir? It means people stop saying that, but I know it won't. We will still question why other people aren't showing up for us. And yet I don't think we're doing enough job at questioning why we're not showing up for other people. So I think the part of the vision is showing up for other marginalized voices, showing up for groups protesting reproductive rights, showing up for climate change, because when we show up for them, they then show up for us. By the way, I feel guilty. I don't care as long as they come to my thing, right? So really showing up for other people.
Yeah. Well, in practically every call, if we go through all the calls that we've ever done over the years, most of the men have come to that kind of last point, which is speaking to, unless everyone's free, we're not free. So how can I be, as a queer person, with my package of being queer, bridge the gaps and challenge the status quo and be the loving disturbance, so that other people get free as well, who are equally, if not majorly, suppressed and oppressed in greater ways than we are. So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, great. So I this has all been juicy, and I want to we have a few people on the call, and if they want to actually ask you any questions that might have gotten stirred from our conversation so far, and then we'll come back and just see if there are things that you want to plug, and we'll kind of close with some thoughts on our end as well.
So if anyone has a question, if you look at the bottom left of your screen, it says mute there and a little icon. You can just click on that mute and it'll unmute you. So So just go right ahead and unmute yourself at will and ask a question of Ken.
Yay, Doug.
I'll kick in here. I'm
Okay.
Doug. This is my husband Peter. Showed up here after walking the dog.
Nice.
I'm a bit older than you. You're younger than my children. I'm what, 78? What you said resonates with me.
Good.
My life is about following the footsteps in the sand, seeing what shows. And for me, I lived through the activism of the Vietnam War, Kent State, assassination of presidents. This is nothing that we're going through now. But I'm glad to see you younger people getting into activism. For me, I'm about looking at these disadvantaged people in the face and walking with them. For example, I was in Atlanta recently where the HIV infection rate is greater than it is in Zimbabwe.
Oh my.
I'm doing work in Kampala, Uganda, with young men who are not HIV tested because they'll get put in prison or killed. It's against the law to be gay.
Yeah. Doug, do you have a question? Do you have a question?
Here, living in Berkeley, California, are not. Well, the question is really of what about, and the need to step up and speak our minds and do something.
Yeah. In my first book, which is a travelogue of kind of my nutty adventures in the world, 2 of the 5 chapters are my experiences of being a white gay Jew in Uganda. And I think disorienting experiences are really important because they give you that perspective that you just don't have hanging out. And so I encourage those whenever possible. Again, that I am extraordinarily privileged to have had those opportunities, but you need to have disorienting experience. You need to get out of that bubble and encounter people who are different than you and have a different vision and have a different philosophy, because it either helps change yours and disagree, then it confirms the way that you approach things. And I'm good with either one of those, but you will never know if you don't actually have those authentic way, presence and listening, not going in, right? Like the same as I tell my students, if you have your hand raised the whole time, you were to me. And approach situations with maybe not our hand physically raised, but we're approaching it in the spirit of having our hand raised, being ready to say what it is that we want to say. And there's no way to have an actual exchange when that's happening.
Great. So be prepared with
here in the States are those that are my age who are isolated. The epidemic thought they were going to die, gave up their work and their money, and now they are in difficult situations. So there's a huge these people and deal with it. So, I don't know which populations you've been.
So Doug, if I may, I'd like to mute you, and then I think someone else would like to ask a question. Hold on just a second. I'm going to mute you, Doug.
Question?
There we go.
Oh, I just.
Thank you.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Alan.
Whoops, sorry. Let's unmute Alan.
Meeting each other, sorry.
There we go.
I love that you were motivated by doing good, and I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about how you know when you're doing good. Feeling, is it an intellectual process? Is it something? I don't know. Just how do you know when you're doing good? Ken is muted.
Sorry.
There we go. The techno parts of this. Yeah.
Great question that I'm so excited about. I think that has to come from within, right? Like not something that I can seek from other. It is a feeling. God, what a horrible way of answering this. Right, the old Supreme Court definition of pornography, that I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. What a horrible way of answering this question.
That's a good start.
I think that if it motivates me to good, I've never engaged in a project and had it be an end point. I think the ones that were an end point are ones that I'm like, oh, that didn't work. Something else.
Okay.
That's kind of my definition of doing good, that it's a perpetual process. And that if I hit a wall, I didn't push it in a way that was very authentic to me, right? I'm not trying to achieve results necessarily with doing good. I'm trying to engage in my journey. I am kind of annoyed with that question because I know now that I'm going to be up all night thinking about it, Alan. I appreciate that.
Done here.
Yeah, I think what an absolutely wonderful question, and right, like I'm not trying to quantify it, but one, and I think it's one that I'm going to wrestle with, and I will never forget you, Alan, and not in a good way. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. You get the Juicy Question Award for the night. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Beautiful.
Good one.
Yeah, I mean, you know that the people on the call and the people that will probably tune into this are pretty much into embodied spirituality. So actually, what you said is perfect. They'll get it. You're listening to your body. That's how you know, because your body is telling you the truth at all times. So. I don't want to elaborate on your words, but I think people kind of live in that question in a deeper way than many. So yeah, thank you for that. Anybody else before we question? Yes, go ahead.
Right, well, I was going to say, I think the most important thing moving forward is that we not let Alan on any of these future calls. Say.
I love it.
Any last question for Ken?
Question?
Something burning on your mind. All right. Well.
So any closing thoughts, and let me make a remark, and part of it's just because I just, on my Facebook page, almost once a week at least, I'll say thank you to somebody out there doing the work, whatever the work is, the journalists that are doing the work on behalf of truth, and the historians who are doing the work on the behalf of really helping us understand and make sense of our world. And so, Ken, I want to thank you for both of those things, of bringing our history, because part of my belief and part of what motivates me in these calls is I don't believe as queer people yet we really know who we are. We've had too many thousands of years of being oppressed for us to all of a sudden, even though we've had moments of liberation here and there, to really know fully who we are. So it's going to take the historians and the journalists to actually help us remember who we are and build on that. And to break through those levels of oppression that get encoded in our genes, in just a few years or a decade. So thank you. Now, having said my thank you, are there any kind of closing wisdom remarks that you might want to share with us, and anything that you want to plug about works that you're doing or projects that you're doing, or ways that people might want to contact you? So it's yours.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that I can plug more than everyone just doing good, right? Like, voice and to do something. And I don't, by the way, I'm not one of these people who are like, oh, you have to do good every day. That's exhausting. Take a day and just lives. I do it. I'm thrilled with that. Do whatever you need to do to recharge, to do good a different day.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I from me than that. But yeah, I certainly, if you were to go over to the see my different books there, and I will say that I'm particularly proud of the audio book for Seriously, What Am I Doing Here? The book is great. I'm really proud of the book, and I stand by my work, and I'm proud of what I accomplished with that first travelogue of my difficult situations. And it's a very gay book, but it's not a coming out book. Like, I was already out. It was actually me traveling the world after sometimes go. So I enjoy the book and certainly enjoy the process, but I'm really proud of the audiobook. So if people want to pick up the audiobook, it's right there on Amazon, or you can even get it through Audible. And then I like to, even though this show is so gay, I'm committed to maintaining that website because I'm really proud of, the goal was to do maybe 10. And I stopped This Show Is So Gay after 10 years on episode number 430. And it gave me the unbelievable opportunity to speak to heroes of mine who really have done good, who have used their voice to make a difference. And so all of those episodes are up on This Show Is So Gay out. And then just more about me and the weird things I'm working on are always over at Ken.com. It's KENSCHNECK.com. That's me plugging.
Great. No, thank you. And I think that's also on your bio. So if somebody didn't get that, they can just click on the bio and see how to reach you. Great. So thank you. Well, Donnie and I are so thrilled to have you, and we look forward to our next call, most probably with our beloved Christopher Love. At least he will be doing something, and you may even know Christopher Love, who came from Cincinnati to San Francisco, who's now going to North Carolina. So we do that, don't we? So that will be the next call, probably with Christopher Love. We'll be sending out about that. Men who are in the Bay Area, just a couple of things that Flesh and Spirit's doing before we close the call is, we are doing our healers training starting the 21st of this month, and we're also doing our naked winter solstice ritual on the 21st of December, which is always yummy, juicy, heartful time to set an intention. So kind of following with what you guided us into tonight, what are really the intentions of our hearts that we want to create. So that will be happening. And our website is fleshandspirit.org. Mm-hmm. So thank you all for being on the call. Thank you, Ken, for all of you who asked questions and participated, and for all of those who will be listening in later. So namaste.
Namaste. Thank you all. Have a good evening.